Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Wavelength.
The real issue with data privacy is who's collecting your data behind the scenes, so in the back end of it, and who is that being shared with.
Sparking the combos about Adelaide.
It's every woman's choice. If they choose to have an abortion, then so be it.
You should be having...
These issues need to be properly investigated, and we need to make sure that LGBTIQ people are supported to be who they are.
On Fresh 92.7.
Welcome to Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. I'm your host, David, and joining me tonight is Jamie. How are you doing, my love?
Hello, I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty all right. Still recovering from the weekend.
Oh, me too. You and me both. I had one too many beers last night. Don't tell anyone.
Don't tell anyone. Don't tell Mum.
Don't tell Mum. Just tell Adelaide on the radio instead.
Just broadcast it to the city of
I
Adelaide.
just want to let everyone know, what I've been up to. Anyway, to tonight's show. Tonight on Wavelength, we're asking why is it still so hard for girls to say no to the advances of guys? Whether it's on Tinder or in the club, women still find it hard to brush off clingy men who don't get the vibe. We're going undercover this week to find out why that is.
We'll also be letting you know everything you need to know about the coronavirus. But next, we're speaking to the developer of an app that makes it easier to find LGBTQI-friendly venues in Adelaide. You're listening to Fresh.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. Jamie, I feel like over the last few years, especially since marriage equality was legalised in Australia, it's become a lot easier to be an out and proud member of the LGBTQI community here in Adelaide.
So true. But for many of those people in the community, it's not always that easy to find a place to meet, feel comfortable, and let their guards down.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, this week, Adrian spoke to Matt and Tish, developers behind the app called Spectrum, who are making it a whole lot easier to find these places.
Wavelength. On Fresh 92.7.
The queer community has been creating safe spaces for them to hang out, socialise and celebrate themselves. But even nowadays, there are venues where the LGBTQ plus folk do not feel safe. That's why Matt and Tish decided to create the app Spectrum, where users can rate the queer friendliness in different venues and locations, as well as other features.
So it's a queer community app. It's aimed at helping people who are isolated, closeted or at risk, and it's really about helping them improve their mental health outcomes. So it allows you to rate and view and add queer-friendly venues in your local area. It also has a library of information from queer organisations like ACON, Thorn Harbour, also places like Beyond Blue. In addition to that, we also have queer stories from people who are a part of the community who just have written into us and want to tell their story. In addition to that, we also have a contacts page.
One of the beautiful things about the app is that we want to act as that centralised hub for any current services that exist in market and provide it in basically a neat little app that fits in your pocket. Because there's already so many great organisations that are providing, mental health services, support groups, community gathering events and whatnot. So we saw an opportunity to really having that consolidated into one place.
How does it work? Who decides what venues go in? Is it just all user-based? Do we add the venues? How does it work?
Yeah, so all the users of the app do add the venues and they rate them as well. There are a couple of organisations out there like ACON with the Welcome Here project and the Safe Space Alliance who work on more of a business side of things. So they'll go to businesses and they'll sort of put them through a bit of a training, or they'll say, are you queer-friendly or not? And they'll add them to their database. We wanted to really empower the community to be like, no, you don't tell me you're a safe space. I tell you that I feel safe at your venue. And then we also have a bunch of other criteria rather than just like a 5-star rating. It's about, is this venue good for gay people? Is it good for trans? Because obviously a gay man will have a different experience at a venue than a trans woman will. So it's really important to not just sort of have an umbrella rating for everyone.
Yeah.
In addition to that, there's things you can rate on like whether they have good bathrooms, whether the security staff are okay, whether the bar staff are okay, whether the crowd's all right.
It's a really good anecdotal story from a conversation I had recently. I was talking to the founder at Pride Cup who work with young LGBT people in the sports kind of arena, and they would basically invite people to come along to a sporting club and be part of an event they're hosting that day, but then they would get pushed back and say, I can't go there because I don't know what the bathroom situation would be like. So even at the most basic level, that's how we see this feature being really useful.
In terms of the app, it also has other features, and I want to ask you about the library feature, and more specifically, who is writing the articles?
So we actually source content multiple ways. We start off with reaching out to the community to get real life stories, because we find that there's such a strong message in just hearing from other people who might be going through similar things as you. And then we reach out to our partners like University of Queensland or Startout, where they can help provide tips and guides on specific topics. And then we also go to key LGBT organisations like Thorn Harbour to help provide really useful information on sexual health, or like Matt said, Beyond Blue, who provide, real good content in the mental health space.
One of the things that I really found when I was sort of figuring out myself was that I could, type in what does being gay mean into Google and get 10,000 responses that I didn't really know what they were. The sort of aim with us and the library and things like that is to become the source of all that sort of stuff, whether it, as Tish said before, like pulling in, making it a hub of different information from different places, to become that like one trusted source that you can go to get that information that you really need, rather than having to search through God knows what on Google.
Mm-hmm. My personal favorite feature, which is the contacts. How did you, what made you think that the people needed this? Is because you think that people aren't awfully aware that these platforms exists?
Yeah, well, when we were researching what to add, I didn't know half the places we put in there in the end. It's like, I didn't know you could find places like that. So when we were sort of designing what we wanted to put in the app, the whole idea was to think about, and we asked this question of a lot of people, what did you need when you were younger that would have helped you deal with it a bit better? And this is something that came up quite a lot, access to resources. I mean, I know for me, like if I'd had access to Beyond Blue or the Butterfly Foundation, I could have had a much easier time because, not only do you come out, but then you have mental health things you have to deal with. You have, in my case, disordered eating, all kinds of things that come up as a queer person who has to sort of go through that process. And having knowing where you can find all that access is really, really important.
What essentially happened when building an app is, we started with a lot of customer research or user research, and made sure that we really understood what people wanted and what they need. And at every point of the journey, when we're even designing just, designs on a paper and not even the digital build yet, we would, check in with people and do user testing and make sure that, we were really solving for some of the challenges that's out there today.
Doing a bit of research, Australia has it's not always been known for being like the most queer-friendly country. However, it is within the 20 most queer-friendly countries in the world at the moment. So would you say Australians as a whole need this app more than other countries?
Yeah, absolutely. When we did some research, we saw some really, really alarming stats around how, queer people are more susceptible to depression and, suicide. And really that says it all. I don't think that, I think to Matt's point, like sometimes you still go out and as a queer person, you might not feel safe. So we definitely think that, I still think there's so much opportunity for us to do better for the community and for us to, help make it even better than what it is now.
I think a lot of people think that, we've got marriage equality and that solves the problem, but that doesn't really account for all the other issues that are going on.
Exactly.
It's like a band-aid over like a bullet wound, basically. There are so many things within our community that still need to be addressed, like within and outside of the community as well. And I think that the current political climate as well really does embolden some people who maybe might want to sow discord or even cause harm to members of the community. As much as things are better, there's still so far to go. And we really want to make sure that Spectrum gives the community the tools and the power to be able to weather those sort of situations. And, eventually we'd love to be able to contribute to the betterment of that community in this country and elsewhere. I also think that a lot of the work that's been done has been very much focused on white gay men. And I think there's so many other people in our community, whether they're lesbian, trans, intersex, whatever they might be, who maybe don't feel the same sort of outcomes that we might feel, because we've sort of been centered in this debate a lot, because, the closest thing to a cisgendered heterosexual male is a cisgendered gay male. So, it's really making sure that everyone is represented, not just, the color pink.
Do you have any plans on bringing it overseas, anywhere else?
Yeah, absolutely. Like the app can be applied overseas right now, right? Because when you think about the feature, anyone can go on there and add a venue, start rating. So in terms of ability to do that, the app can do that now, which is great. But we do want to focus on the Australian communities first, because, really kind of honing in on what the community needs and making sure that we don't go to another country before we really nail it here in Australia.
Any plans for new features?
Yeah, so we're actually looking at developing an events feature at the moment. So that would sort of tie into our places feature, which would allow queer businesses to post events and allow the users to see things that are happening around the local area, both in person and online. it's really sort of been something that when we've spoken to venues and organisations, they've really been asking for this because, there's Facebook and stuff like that, but it's really hard to cut through that noise of social media in that way. And also, as things return to COVID normal, whatever you want to call that, it's a really important time to start focusing on getting back out there and keeping some of these queer businesses afloat. Yeah. And also our sort of main target audience is definitely those, people who are isolated, closeted, at risk. But in order to reach those people and really populate the app with the places and the library, we really want to call out to the queer community that's already kind of here and established and knows all the good places to go and has stories to tell, to really get involved and jump on the app and add places, rate places, tell their story.
If this is the first time as a listener that you are finding out about Spectrum app, head to our website, spectrumapp.lgbt, to get the link to download the iPhone and Google app, as well as check us out on socials.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
Welcome back to Wavelength with David and Jamie, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. So we're about to crack into our lead story for the evening, where we're asking, why is it still so hard for girls to say no to guys?
Yeah, so Hamish and Amila have worked really hard on this one, and it's really about discussing why, in 2020, do girls still feel so scared to reject men they're really not keen on, in the club, on Tinder, etc., etc.
Yeah, anyway, we've got the first part of the story by Amila for you right now.
Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
While talking and meeting new people can be fun, there's also the chance you'll run into someone who won't accept your disinterest kindly. For Ebonie Sanderson, she faced this problem after matching with Thomas McGurk on Tinder. Once she unmatched because she felt the conversation wasn't going anywhere, he found her on Instagram, where he sent numerous insulting voice messages. This is what she had to say about the whole ordeal.
I'm not insecure about my body or my weight, so to have his comments affect me, in the end, an insult's an insult. So, yeah, it was quite upsetting to hear someone say all those nasty things about you and in such a short period of time. But what made me want to take action, it wasn't that night that I thought, yeah, I'm going to do something. Because he'd sent them as voice memos, my head went straight into he's good at this. He's done this before. He's a repeat offender. Basically, I blocked him and a new Instagram account messaged me straight away being like, oh, Fatty's running away. Is this the first time you've ever run? So the abuse just continued through the second account.
That's awful.
And that's when I was like, okay, he's got backup accounts. He's done this before. He obviously trolls or abuses people online. That's exactly why he sent the voice memo, so it was really easy to delete and, it was untraceable. And that's why the next day when I was stewing over whether or not I post this, I was like, if I can just warn a few girls in Bondi, then, I've helped a few people to avoid this guy. So, yeah, I just decided it's going to help a few people. I'm going to post it.
Do you think experiences like this is what makes it so hard for women to come forward and say no, and that they're quite reluctant about it and very careful with how they do it?
If you do feel uncomfortable and people are being forceful or aggressive, making you feel that way, sometimes it's better to tell them how you feel, speak up, because they never know, well, it depends on the extent, or they never have the consequences of being told, no, I feel uncomfortable, I'm not interested in you. Instead, we find other ways to kind of sugarcoat it and cushion the fall, and we worry too much about their feelings rather than our own. Even turning this person down, initially, I was really apologetic. That's ingrained in us. And I posted that we shouldn't do that as women, but, let's be real, I do it as well. It's just for our own comfort. Sometimes we're more comfortable by not making them uncomfortable. So,
do you still use online dating then? You're not reluctant despite the bad experience?
Yeah, I'm still online dating. And initially I did go inactive for a little while. But then again, I was just like, I shouldn't be changing my behaviour, or I shouldn't be getting off online dating when, these people are the problem that are harassing women and, doing this to multiple women at the same time. I'm not going to get off these apps. People like him should get off these apps.
I also had a chat to the founder of Females Fighting Forward, Carly Gangel, who gave me the rundown on why women come in to take self-defence.
A lot of women come in because they have had a previous negative experience with someone else. A lot of women turn to martial arts and learning self-defence because of a lack of confidence. Now, it's very mixed as to whether these women come in to gain confidence from a past experience or whether they have just never really grown up having that confidence. A lot of grown women tend to turn to it when they face a confrontation at work. So they think, my work life's going to be a lot better if I've got that self-confidence to stand up for myself and put my best foot forward.
Do you see a future where there isn't a need to learn self-defence?
I don't think it's realistic. I think that there is always, not just women, I think that violence is always going to be a thing in our society, whether that be against men, against children or against women. And I think that everyone, as much as I would love to say shouldn't have to learn self-defence, and neither should anyone else, but it's a reality, and I think we should all take a level of responsibility for ourselves to know that if we're put in that situation that we can look after ourselves.
Why do you think it's been taking this long to see a shift in mentality, and what do you hope for the future?
I think as a society, everything tends to move quite slowly, but I feel like in the community now, people can stand up and, and they can stand up for what they believe in, which is really cool. And I think social media has played a big part in being able to bring light to some of these issues. So I think we have a long way to go, but I can see many workplaces and a lot of things out there that are making great change. So even if it does feel slow, change is certainly happening.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
That there was a Miller asking why are women still so afraid to say no to men. A couple of really interesting chats there. I think the first story I want to quickly touch on must be an experience that so many women have experienced. I'm sure she's not alone.
No, not at all. I mean, as a woman myself, I've had that experience happen to me on more times than I can count with my two hands, where you could be on a dating app or you're talking to a guy and then you think you're not really interested, so you kind of stop communication with them, and then they kind of get really aggressive and they'll find you on other forms of social media. They'll harass you, they'll get really angry about it, and it is something that you can tell that they have done before. It's just, it's awful. It's absolutely awful to experience. I think it's really important. It seems that the way that society has gone, there's always the shift. The blame has always been on the women to kind of change their actions, but I think slowly through education and awareness and people being able to create these safe spaces to talk out as females, I think that there's a greater importance on shifting that mirror back into the men of our society, going, it's not me as a woman, it's the behaviour that you are as a man doing to us. If you do get rejected or if you get turned down from an advancement at the bar, like you need to learn to get told no, and that's okay.
Bizarre stuff, but also very common, and that's why we're asking the question tonight. Hopefully that cleared some things up for some people. We've got more of that story, though, from Hamish next, about asking why women are still afraid to say no to guys. But after the break, we'll be letting you know what the hell is going on with politics this week. You're listening to Fresh.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength. We'll be getting back into Amila and Hamish's lead story for the night soon. But now let's throw to, of course, Hamish again to let us know what the hell is going on with politics this week.
What the hell is going on in politics at the moment? Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Hey, it's Hamish, and it's time to look back at some of the biggest stories this week. First up, the PM announced plans to return 26,000 Aussies stranded overseas back onto home soil. ScoMo proposed returning travellers wear ankle bracelets rather than quarantine for 2 weeks, all while Tony Abbott was strangely granted his second exemption from the travel ban. The news comes off the back of over 300 Melburnians taking to the streets in yet another protest of the harsh restrictions still in place, despite dramatic drop-offs in new infections. And the Prime Minister continued to cop it from all angles, with pop star Guy Sebastian pushing for a please explain from the leader about why a $250 million rescue package allocated to the arts and culture sector is yet to be delivered. Also in the news, could the ABC be the next big player on the social media stage? Well, that's what a new proposal has suggested if Facebook follows through on their threat to pull all news stories from their Australian feeds in response to tough new competition laws being brought in by the government. The Centre for Responsible Technology made the suggestion as a way for Australia to survive the potential Texit and stated that a publicly funded platform could connect the community without harvesting users' data like Facebook currently does. Finally, the frontman for glam rock band Twisted Sister has taken Clive Palmer to court over his use of their hit song We're Not Gonna Take It in a number of his campaign ads. And that's what the hell has been going on in politics this week.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
Thanks for that, Hamish. A lot to digest there. First of all, tracking bracelets. Very weird.
Yeah, no, straight away, no, I don't like that at all.
Why is this coming up now? I mean, the hotel quarantine program has worked incredibly well.
Yeah.
It's like the reason that we're mostly COVID-free. So why would
Why
you
are we
just
changing it straight
why would
away?
you
It's
change
like,
it?
why? Yeah, don't fix something that ain't broken.
It's not broken.
And also, like, the app, I feel like there are so many other options before going straight to the old ankle bracelet. Like, we're not criminals.
Yeah.
This is an invasion of privacy to a whole new level. Nah, creepy vibes. I don't like that one.
I don't like tracking devices of any kind.
No.
But I also use an iPhone, so.
Yeah, true. I mean, we signed our life away when we hit that, except
Yeah.
for the terms and conditions, right? That no one read.
Oh, well. And also the $250 million arts program coronavirus package for the arts has not been delivered. Like,
Yeah, no.
What? Just give the money away. Like,
Empty
what
promises.
Yeah, why would you announce that and then just not deliver? I understand bureaucracy takes some time, but it's a pandemic. These people have no money.
Yeah, and it's a really important part of the industry. Like, the whole arts industry is, like, definitely suffering, and there have been so many other packages to other industries like the hospitality industry and so many others. So it's like arts is really important. They always seem to be the guys left on the wayside. It's just really sad.
I know, very sad.
Give the arts some love.
Give them their money.
Give them their money that they deserve.
Oh, well, stay tuned for part 2 of our story about why women are afraid to say no to guys still in 2020. But right now, you're listening to Fresh 92.7.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength. Before the break, we heard part 1 of our story about why women are still afraid to say no, where Amila spoke with someone who's felt the effects firsthand and the founder of Females Fighting Forward. But in part 2, Hamish chats with Professor Christine Beasley about the issue.
Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
We've all heard the horror stories, and it's no surprise women still find it difficult to turn down men without feeling uneasy and intimidated. But why? I spoke with Professor Christine Beasley, a specialist on gender and dating, to dive a little deeper into answering that very question, why the problem persists and what we can all do about it. Why do you think women are still afraid to say no in today's modern dating world?
I think we'd both be well aware that when heterosexual men and women are trying to find out whether they're interested in each other or not, we have many examples. Sometimes some men will not respond well to any negativity, to any form of no, even the gentlest one. And that, of course, is still happening. So you'll still get men in particular not reading signs of I'm not that interested and pursuing because there's a lot of training for men to keep pursuing because that's supposedly the way you'll get what you want. It is certainly the case that many more women describe men becoming angry when they are in any way refused. We know people have received, say, dick pics or insulting comments, or when women have said, I'm not interested. It seems to me that danger of men becoming angry is a danger that women face when they're trying to date, but all women face in life still, unfortunately, in the world, both offline and online. So negotiating how to let heterosexual men, or men generally, down in some way or another remains an area that is still, unfortunately, somewhat fraught. And I think men know that too. I mean, I think whenever I've talked to people about this, men themselves will say, I know of stories about this. Men sometimes do this. I do think it has become much more of a public conversation, which in some ways is good that it's become public. The fact that you want to talk about it, that you want to have a conversation to say, why are women having trouble with this? Why are they still feeling nervous or anxious about making men angry?
How do we as a society go about changing this?
There is no simple answer. There are probably a number of answers one could make about that. I could state the bleeding obvious and say, of course, having better laws, of course, having more equality in other social structures of our societies. You can have social media provisions that are more alert to bad behaviour. I think we have only just started to really think about forms of etiquette that can be enforced about misconduct and what the consequences of misconduct might be. At the moment, those procedures are there, but pretty weak. But of course, if you don't change the way that society works, if you don't change the way that men and women see themselves in relation to each other, then you're just making laws for picking up things that happen after the fact. Having better ways of dealing with the ups and downs, the pitfalls and pleasures of relationships with other people, is obviously something that we need to be better at. I think it's an educational process. I think it's a matter of regulations and structures. I think it's a continual conversation, a public conversation about how we want men and women to interact with each other. We could go on.
What advice would you give to women about navigating the dating world with confidence and with conviction?
I would say that one of the most helpful things is to talk to your friends about what you're doing and make sure that they know what you're experiencing. And if you have a really unpleasant experience or there's some tirade against you or whatever, making sure that you have a bit of a support system is perhaps the best way. As I think having people to talk to, if you're a female who is engaging in internet dating, heterosexual internet dating, make sure you've got a support system. I think if you keep it to yourself, if you feel you have to keep it to yourself or you feel embarrassed or ashamed or whatever your responses might be, or just pissed off or whatever, then you lose the opportunity, first of all, for others to support you. But not only that, you also lose the opportunity to discover you're not alone.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
That was Hamish chatting with Professor Christine Beasley on his story with Miller about why is it still so hard for women to say no.
Yeah, there are some really, really amazing and interesting points there that Professor Christine Beasley pointed out. Something that I found really cool was just kind of talking about how we do change the structure of society and how, the way that we're going to change these structures are from everywhere, from the top down being like the big companies and everything, but it also trickles down to like conversations you're having with your mates. Whereas like guys, like if you hear or see your guys doing a shady thing or like making a woman uncomfortable, call them out, because that's changing culture as well.
Yeah, that's so true, because I do think that like a lot of the time though, guys do this quite incognito. Like they won't tell they'll do it undercover. Their friends won't see them doing it. A lot of the time it's also on the internet, and with social media, it means that men can pursue you anywhere. They can follow you into your Instagram DMs, into your Twitter DMs.
Yeah, and do it anonymously. I think that's the thing. They can hide behind their screens without any repercussions because they know they're going anonymous. They can't get called out for it.
You were saying something really interesting to me as well at the beginning, when we sat down to do the show, that when you read the question, you were like, I could give you a million reasons. Do you still sort of feel the same way after hearing it?
I do feel the same way, just because it feels like an intuitive reflex for us. In society, we're taught to protect ourselves always, and because the blame has always been put on women, we've learned all of these defense mechanisms growing up. I've had them ingrained in me since I was born. That's just the way society works. We're told to not work home alone, don't wear short skirts. It's all put back on us. So it's just all of these things where it's like, of course I know why it's afraid to say no. We don't want to make these guys feel uncomfortable, because then if we make them uncomfortable, they get mad. Our lives are physically in danger. We're getting physically and sexually abused.
Yeah.
It's just something that feels so natural to me. But it's really important to hear these conversations happen, and it's really important for heterosexual guys to start questioning this as well with their own culture, their own friends, their own family lives. If someone gets told no, it's like, why am I getting so upset and so angry about this? Do I have the right to be? It's just dissecting all of that.
Absolutely. Well, I think Hamish and Amila did a fantastic job with that story. Thank you so much, guys. Anyway, next Wavelength explains everything you need to know about what's happened with the coronavirus this week. But right now, you're listening to Fresh.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having.
Right now, we're getting into our weekly segment where Wavelength explains what's been happening with the coronavirus this week.
Wavelength, on Fresh 92.7.
First off this week, let's take a look at some of the case numbers. As we all know, South Australia's been super fortunate with incredibly low case numbers, and that's continued this week. Just a handful of new infections, all from returning overseas travellers, but not to worry, they're all in hotel quarantine. With just 8 active cases at time of recording, it's looking pretty good for us. And if you're looking to celebrate Halloween this weekend, not to worry, SA Health says it's all good to go trick-or-treating as long as you're social distancing. Meanwhile, over in Victoria, the effects of the major second wave continue to be felt. While cases continue to remain low with a rolling 14-day average of just under 5, the state government's hoping a northern suburbs cluster doesn't get out of control. If it's all good, hopes are they'll be able to reopen businesses as early as late this week. Let's hope it turns out well for them. And otherwise, all the states and territories are looking pretty good on the case front, with very low numbers recorded over the last 7 days. Meanwhile, in some good news, we're now able to travel to Tasmania without quarantining, so if you're looking for a holiday, you're in luck. And if I were you, I'd get bookings straight away. And speaking of travel, New Zealanders are now allowed to travel straight into SA without quarantine. That news comes after a number of Kiwis arrived into the travel bubble in New South Wales before unexpectedly arriving here last Sunday. Let's hope we're allowed to travel to the land of hobbits before too long. And if you're looking to hop on a plane overseas, Qantas says it's going to be at least another year before we can travel to places like the US and UK, and we'll need a vaccine, according to the chief executive Alan Joyce. However, there could potentially be some travel with some Asian countries where case numbers are low. Finally this week, the World Health Organization's warning many countries are on a dangerous path, with health services at risk of collapse. Europe and the US particularly are sadly going through quite a major second wave as the world passes 40 million coronavirus cases overall. Hopefully we'll see a slowing of cases fairly soon. Well, that's about it for this week. As ever, take care of yourselves, socially distance, and get tested if you have any symptoms whatsoever.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
That there was Andrew letting you know everything you need to know about the coronavirus this week. Some good news there for you.
Oh, yes. My family's from Tasmania, and so I've been wondering if I could go down for Christmas, but now I can.
That's so good.
Oh, stoked. Dad will be so happy.
Yeah. Oh, I'd love to get back down there as well. It's such a beautiful part of the world.
Tassie's the best. So underrated.
So underrated.
It's so beautiful.
I agree.
Yes!
We've got some more Wavelength coming up. You're listening to Fresh 92.7.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having.
Right now, we've got our weekly segment called Heaps Good News. This week, Amila's got the goods for us.
I know there's gonna be Heaps Good News on Wavelength.
Despite how grim coronavirus has made the year for many of us, there's still plenty of good happening. The US has reported that organ donations increased for the 9th consecutive year in 2019. Over 40,000 transplants were conducted, marking an 8.7% increase from the year prior and saving countless more lives. Meanwhile, in Uganda, a project by One Tree Planted is aiming to revive the environment by planting 3 million trees. Determined to plant them in the Alberton Rift, the massive project endeavours to protect, improve and recover what's been lost of the ecosystem. London is also pushing for change, with the city reporting a 94% reduction in the number of people living in areas with illegal activities of nitrogen dioxide. The levels of nitrogen dioxide by roads in the centre of the city fell by 44% between early 2017 and early 2020, with those numbers not taking into account the impact of COVID-19. For some positive news at home, Tasmanian devils have returned to forests in the north of Sydney. This is the first time the marsupials have been introduced to the mainland in 3,000 years. And at home, SA has become the first major jurisdiction in the world to be powered entirely by solar energy. For 1 hour on October 11, the estate's energy demand was met by solar panels alone. Australian energy market operator Chief Executive Audrey Zibelman is calling the progress a phenomenon in the global energy landscape. Any excess power from gas and wind farms was stored to help out Victoria. That's a wrap for Heaps Good News.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
Thank you for that, Amila. Anyway, Adelaide, that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you so much for listening. And Jamie, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure.
I love hanging out with you.
Aww.
With mics involved.
Only then.
With and without mics, no, always. Make sure you subscribe to the Wavelength podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. You can listen back to our old episodes right now, and you'll be the first to know when tonight's episode goes up.
Wavelength.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.